You're listening to The Real Well Show with Kathy Fedke, the real estate investor's resource.
Becoming a doctor is certainly a difficult goal to achieve. But once you do it, you can help a lot of people become healthy while making a healthy paycheck. But it can also be extremely stressful and demanding. Well, our guest today decided to switch careers from practicing medicine to investing in real estate. I'm Kathy Fedke, and welcome to The Real Well Show. Dr. Patricia Red Hawk was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. She attended Temple University School of Medicine in Philadelphia to become a family physician. And she currently lives with her wife and kids in the Pacific Northwest. And she's here with us today on The Real Well Show to tell us why she left the field of medicine to invest in real estate instead. Well, Dr. Red Hawk, welcome to The Real Well Show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, what a year. Boy. All right. Well, there's so much we can talk about, but let's dive into the most basic question, which is, how did you go from being a doctor to being a real estate investor? And are you doing both?
Yeah, I am not doing both. I stopped practicing medicine in 2010. I was a family medicine physician working in Philadelphia. And I'm not doing both. And it's not any kind of secret why I left medicine. Oftentimes we get into pathways where the career is separate from the job. And when I got into the brass tacks of the job, I realized it really wasn't the kind of fit that I was looking for my life. I think the American healthcare system is broken. And truthfully, Kathleen, I was unwilling to put really the best years of my life into that. Along the way, I decided that I really wanted kind of a different kind of life than practicing medicine would necessarily provide me. I wanted more time. I wanted more control over my time. I wanted greater flexibility and greater security as well. And it took me a couple years to transition from stopping my medical practice to embracing fully real estate investing. But I'm so happy I did, because real estate investment has really allowed me to live exactly the kind of life that I would want for myself. I've been able to reverse engineer what the perfect day looks like for me. And I was able to achieve those things, more security, more control, more time. Once your monthly expenses are covered by your monthly income from your, rental portfolio, then you really allow the opportunity to craft a very different kind of life for yourself. So I just look back.
It's so interesting just hearing you speak, because becoming a doctor is, that's a great goal, right? And one that most people would dream of, and is almost a certainty to achieving wealth. But what goes with that, a lot of people don't understand. We have a friend who worked in ER, and it took such a toll on him, just everything that goes on in ER, that he got a little tainted towards life. He had to step away from it just to be a human, feel like he was human again.
It's painful in many ways. And I have many physician friends who, we're recording this in the era of coronavirus and looking at sort of another pandemic shutdown. I have friends who are physicians, and it's an extremely hard time for them, and for my nursing friends as well. But I think you're right. It's an incredibly heartbreaking time to be in healthcare. And while I miss the patient care aspect, I love being involved with people's lives and helping them in really very important ways. I still do that as a real estate investor, but it's a whole different ball of wax.
Well, you don't have the freedom really as a doctor. I do have, and we'll get back onto real estate, but we have two family members who wanted to focus more on holistic. We have a Fedke in Australia who discovered that there was a connection between sugar and cancer. And when he wrote a book on that and started speaking about it, he lost his license.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So very interesting. And then he regained it. They apologized, but it's got to be tough if you know something and aren't allowed to do it.
True. And I think to circling back to how you started it is a certainty to to a steady income, et cetera. But it does come with quite a high price to pay. And really came down to it. One day I remember this epiphany where I thought to myself, I'm looking at the senior members, other physicians in my practice, and I realized that I was low on the totem pole, but their day was looking just like mine, which is everybody is running late by 10 a.m. And nobody can take an hour for lunch because everybody's on the phone arguing with the insurance companies and managed care companies to do their job. You can't take a random hour or two off in the afternoon just to go watch your kids play ball or something like that. And, as women, I'll tell you, you go home at the end of the day, you're parenting, you're being a partner, you're cooking, you're running your household, everybody quiets down about 9 o'clock, and then you're doing charting and documentation and paperwork until well into the wee hours. I'll tell you, every primary care physician I know does that.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing where I thought, I can't live my life like this. It precluded me from living my authentic authentic life, of being the kind of parent I wanted to be, of living the kind of life of adventure, of outreach and sharing with friends and family and exploring the world and embracing my adventurous self. And it just wasn't going to align well with that. So I had to find something else. And thank goodness I had been exposed to real estate investing early on in my life. And it took me a couple years after I stopped practicing medicine to come back to it. But I'm all in now. I have been for a few years now. So it's going very well. And I don't intend to go anywhere soon, except for maybe Malibu for surfing.
Well, it's really amazing to think that for me growing up, if you wanted to become wealthy, you become an attorney or a doctor. And
Sure.
the barrier to become that was so high, right? The hoops that you had to jump over, to get there. It was so intense. And then you look at real estate, and the barrier to entry is it's just really, it's available to anyone. That's what got my interest, is when I started interviewing people, these were kids in their 20s that had never gone to college, started in high school, and were already retired without an education. It's just phenomenal. So,
and take it to the other end too, because I'm a woman in my mid 50s, and I often meet other women in my same age. They might be single, they might be still married, physicians or dentists, something like that, and they have not planned appropriately for their retirement. And so to take it to the other end of the spectrum, real estate investment is one of those things that allows you to turbocharge your retirement portfolio so that you don't have to worry about how you're going to live. And, as you well know, women have additional challenges as senior citizens than men do. We live longer than male partners if you have one. We typically will always use more healthcare dollars in our retirement. We've typically also been underinvested in whatever it is, stock market or non-stock market, whatever. And on top of that, typically over the course of our working life, we have earned fewer dollars, 72, 75 cents to every man's $1. So that means all those matching dollars, if you had a corporate job, don't exist for you at the same level as well. So we need so much more to provide for us out of our retirement income. Real estate is the one thing I know of that can do that, whether your early 20s or in your mid 50s. But real estate is the one thing that can turn it around for you. So I'm a huge believer. Absolutely.
There doesn't appear to be a glass ceiling in real estate.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's true. And did you find the pay difference to be true in your field as well? In medicine?
No, actually, sadly, there have been a series of studies that have come out that have indicated that women are actually earning fewer dollars as a physician, and even when they controlled for things like experience and specialties, et cetera, still finding that women are underperforming, or rather under-earning their male counterparts who are also physicians. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me. I somehow had thought that we all go through the training. We all go through the many, many years, et cetera. And it's a very arduous training process. We all do the same amount of work. So why is it that men are compensated more?
Wow.
Age question. Yeah. So that was heartbreaking. So but I have that conversation with women physicians and orthodontists and dentists who reach out to me and say, I didn't realize this. My colleagues are making more than I do. It's
Right.
just heartbreaking. Yeah. It's like,
hopefully that changes. I mean, just in our age group, I'm in a similar age as you. There were very few outspoken real estate investor women that I know of. I mean, they were probably behind the scenes, very active in the business. I think couples, families owning rental properties and apartments, but women weren't out talking about it so much. I feel like in many ways I was a trailblazer, and you too.
Absolutely.
So what did it take to kind of, again, trailblaze to be different than other females?
Well, I think I realized that I sort of have been kind of walking through otherwise closed doors my whole life. And I'm not even sure why that is or how that is. I was raised by a single mom, and I saw her do a lot of things that were sort of atypical for women who had grown up during sort of the World War II generation. But she did what she had to do to make a life for us. And I think I got the message that nobody, you shouldn't be waiting around for Prince Charming, that you really need to make your own decisions and move forward on your own. And later on, as I grew up and matured, I realized as a gay woman, there was not going to be any Prince Charming, or maybe I needed to be my own Prince Charming. And so, there was never getting married or something like somebody else being a part of a financial picture was never part of my understanding of myself early on. And so I think that the things that I was naturally drawn to do early on, like I was one of the first little girls to play Little League baseball in the United States.
Wow.
And I was the second girl in California to play Little League baseball, and I look back at doing that, I think I was maybe 11 or 12. I can't believe I did that, and I've done other sort of things that were atypical for women. I put myself through college and worked full time in construction during the day and went to school at night and et cetera. But I also knew I needed more money to go to university to transfer. And so I joined the California Army National Guard, and I used the GI Bill. And, that's not something typically that a lot of women are necessarily attracted to or see it as an option. But I got to tell you, looking back now at my life, I realized my experiences in typically male-dominated fields, construction, the military, medicine, have served me well in so many ways that it just makes opening doors up now even easier, having the confidence of the previous experiences. So I think is sort of a roundabout answer, but I have no specific thing I can point to. It's just I have an adventurous kind of can-do spirit and went where I wanted to go.
Awesome. Yeah, the construction field is really interesting. It is. I mean, we've had very few female contractors, and I wonder why. We have two within our network that are excellent at what they do. Yeah, but how did you get into construction?
Basically, here's the short story. It's not too glamorous. I was in a head-on collision in my very early 20s. And it took I had a long rehab period to get myself back on my feet. A woman turned into me as she was making a left-hand turn. And I remember I was having tacos with friends of mine, two women who I know to this day, and we've known each other all our lives. And they're saying, well, gee, what are you going to do now? Now that I had survived my injuries and stuff. Like, it's like, well, I'll go to night school. The junior college, system is great in California. And I said, I don't know. And then one of my friends says, well, men always make more money than women. What do men do? And we just kind of were brainstorming and we came across construction, and I had taken drafting. And we're like 19, 20 years old, Kathy. We're not super bright here. But I had taken drafting while I was in college, or excuse me, while I was in high school, and also had done drafting in the military, in the Army National Guard. And I thought that is probably a skill I can parlay. I actually know how to build a house because I've done it on paper and drawn it a million times. I knew the names of things, I knew the codes, et cetera, because I had been drawing them. So I cold called women general contractors and got myself a job with one, and it worked out great. And that's how I literally got into it. It's because I could draw and draft. I worked with her and kind of furthered my experience, and went on to become a general contractor myself. And I have to say, I just recently moved to Oregon, and I think I'll be getting another GC license here as well. And to your point about why there aren't more women doing it, I think women are hardwired to do well as a general contractor.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Anybody can raise kids and get Thanksgiving on the table for everybody. We are born multitaskers, right?
Well, I haven't made a Thanksgiving dinner in years, but you know what? Who makes it? Whole Foods. They do a great job. I leave it to them.
Exactly. But I think that women are fantastic general contractors when they do it, because they for the things that I think that make women successful investors as well, is that we nurture and develop relationships. And all business is about relationship. When I speak to other groups, I say this all the time. It doesn't even matter what your industry is. All business is about relationship. But also our ability to multitask is fantastic. Our ability to communicate, that's the number one complaint clients have of their general contractors, to say that the communication skills were crap. Mm-hmm. And women are great at that. And I feel like we already bring so many fantastic skills to the table, just how we're socialized. And for those women who choose to go into construction and become general contractors, I've never known one to not be successful at doing that. So I applaud any of them who's doing that as well.
I just feel like that is something I hope is encouraged, because I agree. And the detail and follow up and schedule, I just, seems like a great fit.
And it is, and it speaks to our innate gifts in many ways.
Yeah. All right. So tell me about your first investment and what kind of assets you've been investing in since.
Sure. My first investment is great because those of us who've been in this field for a while remember those numerous fabulous infomercials with Carlton Sheets. And For those, I know I'm taking us back. For those of you who have not seen it, basically it was Carlton was a very successful investor and investment educator, and he would have these interviews with everyday folks who had taken his course and applied it and made great money. And the infomercials always had like the palm trees in the background. And it was very enticing, and lots of folks spent a lot of money. I actually never bought the course, but I will say this: I watched enough infomercials that I understood what it is that they were doing. And so I talked to a former partner, and I said, hey, I think we should do this, and here's why, and kind of explain it out to her. And she said, sure, I think this is a good idea. She was a resident physician at the time, finishing up her training. I was at home being a stay-at-home mom with our infant son, and I started to mention it to folks what I was interested in doing, and basically what is now the BRRRR strategy. And a friend said, hey, you know what? A childhood friend of mine is selling her childhood home. It's in South Philadelphia. Are you interested? It needs some work. And I'm like, yeah, let's go take a look at it. He's a contractor himself and grew up in the neighborhood. And we went and took a look at it, and it needed to be cleaned up and updated, but not super bad. It wasn't a full gut rehab, just a good moderate size rehab. At the time, the comps in the area, it was a row house in South Philly, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. And the comps at the time were about $75,000. But she only wanted $40K for the house.
Wow.
We wrote up the contract.
That's a deal.
Right? We wrote up the contract for $75K. And I got $35,000 back at closing for rehab work. So the rehab basically paid for itself. And it was a classic no money down, because we borrowed $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 or something from my partner's IRA on one day. And then I paid it back the next day because we got so much back at closing. And the money that we got back for repairs completely took care of the rehab. And we got a tenant, and we were talking about flipping it, but then 2008 occurred, and we thought, all right, let's just hold it as a long-term rental. And sure enough, and we just sold it a couple years ago for maybe 125.
Okay.
And it kind of paid for itself in the beginning and paid for itself along the way too. That was my first deal. Classic no money down deal. I can't believe it. And most of it I learned on the back of Carlton Sheets infomercials.
So some value there.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right.
Now, though, indeed. So I continue to focus my efforts on residential. And I used to live in Philadelphia. My family and I have recently moved to Oregon, but still focused on residential. However, I'm no longer burring. I'm a little concerned about the future in terms of commercial lending, inflation and deflation, the buying power of the dollar, and things like that. So I'm concerned for some of the macroeconomic pictures, and I don't think burr is actually all that viable a play right now overall. So I'm really focusing on a couple of things. One is I'm buying in the Portland area. So I'm buying newer construction houses and renting them out to millennial professionals by the room. And I'm taking a page out of a couple of folks who do this, who do student housing the same way. And there's another guy in Seattle who's doing this in his market at a higher end. But these are millennial professionals who, can live in a bedroom of a new house with, all the amenities included, utilities included, and maid service, et cetera. And it's a great cash flow play. So I'm doing that in the Portland market.
Wow.
And which is a nice way to go because, when you have rentals, what it's like. You're always people say you always want to hold out a certain percentage for vacancies and repairs and things like that. And so much nicer. There's a huge demand for this in very select markets, Seattle being one, Portland being one, San Francisco, LA, Austin, San Antonio, places where there are tech hubs. And there are millennial professionals who don't want to, pay $2,500 a month to live. That's living plus utilities and kind of everything else, where they can live and share a house with others. And it's a new house. It's a beautiful house. And all that stuff is included, and it's less what they would pay if they were living on their own. And so that particular tactic is gonna work for the young millennial professional who might be making six figures or maybe 90K to kind of 115, and they could buy a house if they wanted to, but not necessarily in that place in their life, but they're looking for a higher quality living experience, and so that's what I'm focusing on the next couple of years.
Do you self-manage?
I do. These ones I do, yes. And I find that I'm not typically a fan of self-managing, and my other rental portfolio, I have property managers in place. But this is more of a high touch kind of tactic, and I want to make sure that I'm staying very close to it. So, are
you offering it furnished?
Yes.
So it's furnished. So it's like basically a hotel room within a house.
Exactly, and everything. So you've got the ESPN and Apple TV and Hulu and Showtime and blah, 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 weekly maid service, supplying paper products and household soaps, that kind of thing. And it's all just, and utilities are included, and it's all just, one check every month for them. And it's a nice cash flow play.
Yeah, because it's not that easy to cash flow in Portland. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, that and Airbnbs for sure.
Indeed. And this is one of those strategies that is only going to work in basically very expensive markets, and primarily those markets that are driven by the tech industry. Yeah. Of course, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, areas that have a lot of young folks who make good money, but that's not necessarily interested in buying a house at this time. So
how do you find your tenants for that?
At this point, word of mouth. There's been a lot of interest. And so it's a lot of
friend tells a friend or something, and
yep, exactly. So nice way to go.
And I'm also just go into corporations and tell them you've got housing available or something.
Yeah, and of course, I always reach out to the medical center as well because, being a physician, I want resident physicians to have, not that they're making six figures, but I want them to have quality places to live too. And so I do that as sort of a giving back to my medical community. So, and I'm going big on this. So 2021, I'm focused on that in terms of my sticks and bricks acquisitions, but my investment portfolio overall also includes a lot of buying and selling of notes, which I think is an important ongoing play as well. So those are the two big ones.
That's a great business. It's boy, if you understand calculators, first you can do so well just in selling a note at let's see, how does it work? At a discount. Yeah.
And what's nice is it's that set it and forget it, right? Because nobody's calling me about a drippy faucet or, a sprinkler head that's broken. They're just making their mortgage payments every month. And that's a real nice play. And of course, when you buy a note, it maybe the interest rate would be, say, 8% yield to maturity, right? So if you're going to have that note for the 15, 16, 17 years that might be left on it, then you would make maybe 8% yield to maturity. But the reality is, as you well know, most mortgages refinance at about the 7.5-year mark. So if I'm buying a note, a seller finance note from mom and pop, and it's technically 8% yield to maturity if I hang on to it that long. But 6 months or so after I've owned the note, I'll call the borrower and say, hey, can I help you figure out how to refinance? Because you could get into something a lot cheaper. And as soon as they do that and pay me off sooner, my yield goes up because it's the time value of money. So even though initially it looks like an 8% yield to maturity, if I held it the whole time, the reality is as soon as the borrower refinances and cashes me out, my return on investment is double digits. You could double, triple, quadruple.
Wow.
Investment. So
you buy existing
money. It's knowing the math. So
that's it. It's the math that not everybody loves math, but and I've taken so many note classes, and that's just one thing that I've always wanted to do. I mean, we do private lending, but I know there's a way to make a lot more than the 8%, 10%, 12%.
Indeed.
That'll be my future career.
Well, I do private lending as well. So I completely appreciate your perspective on that. And I feel like given all the finance that I'm involved in, I feel like I could barely make change when I'm at the store. But so I have to laugh at the irony.
Also, then anyone could do. Well, I'm pretty sure you're a smart cookie. So, not everyone. Not everyone likes math. With real estate, with rentals, it's just kind of pretty straightforward, especially when you have a property manager taking care of things.
Very true.
But so what would you say is next for you? Are you concerned at all about any economic changes or change in leadership in the country, or are you not so worried about that?
Well, I got to tell you, the leadership doesn't. Change of leadership doesn't concern me, and I think the markets have I think that change of leadership as well as the recent news about vaccines have been quite buoyant. I think one of the things that the markets have taken into account in terms of the political side of the house is the fact that President-elect Biden will be moving into a divided government. So, it's not the triple threat. It's not Democratic control of all three entities. And I think that that markets like that.
Markets love that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The gridlock is good for the stock market.
Absolutely. And so I think that, and we can certainly, as real estate investors, can take a page out of that. So I don't really worry about the administration piece so much. I'll tell you, though, I am quite concerned on a much more of an macroeconomic basis. So I'm a big believer in education. As a physician, I was trained to constantly, to maintain excellence in my field, I needed to be reading and studying and literally every week. I still do that. I carry that with me now. And I consume an enormous amount of educational material every week. And not just in real estate investing, but macroeconomics and global economies, et cetera, currency situations. And one of the things I'm concerned about is that we're printing money like no one ever took an Econ 101 class. And so how is that going to come back around? And understanding sort of the difference between inflation and deflation, and the fact that we'll probably see both, and how to best prepare my family's portfolio and my investment partners that I work with. And so one of the things I teach about, as well as talk to when I'm presenting, is the idea of having both an offensive and a defensive portfolio. You really need to have both, and have those, hold those assets that do well during market declines. And it's all the classic stuff, precious metals, that kind of thing. High cash value, whole life insurance, if that's a play that folks are interested in. And then on the more offensive side, being well diversified within the real estate investment arena, including private money lending, the notes, holding sticks and bricks, et cetera, optimizing my tax picture as well. And so I feel like regardless of which way the economy goes, I'm well diversified and I'm balanced. And like I mentioned, I'm no longer doing really the burr strategy, because I think that's a tactic that is best used during an upswing in the market cycle. I think we're at the top. Some markets are already sort of declining. And so I'm preparing for a decline. And while I don't think we're going to see sort of the massive amount of foreclosures like we did in 2008 and in the wake of the Great Recession, I still think that there are some fundamental issues with our economy that even before COVID. Mm-hmm. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm not as, I'm being very careful and very disciplined with what tactics I'm embracing. So I feel like I'm being much more conservative. I want to make sure, for instance, we all know this, once markets start to tank, commercial lending is one of the things that clam up. So it doesn't matter if interest rates are zero. The reality is, if nobody's lending, you still can't get that kind of mortgage. Mm-hmm. So I'm really concerned about sort of the larger picture and sort of the macroeconomic picture. I don't know how we're going to get ourselves out of this. And I listen to Ray Dalio, I listen to Warren Buffett, and Robert Kiyosaki, and James Rickards, and even Harry Dent, and just trying to get a handle on what is the broader picture, what might that look like. And I have tremendous concern, I think, like lots of folks. But I will say this, Kathy, I am still investing, and I'm a sailor. So what I tell people is, it doesn't matter which way the wind blows, I set my sails accordingly and I still make forward progress. And that's how I would encourage other investors to consider too. Not every tactic works at all the time. Some tactics work better at different points in the market cycle. Figure out where you are, sort of plan for the worst and hope for the best, and plan and execute. But don't sit on the sidelines. There's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, you've got to stress test your investments. They need to, don't only show the pro forma with rents going up.
Absolutely.
Or continued appreciation. I mean, we just don't know. We just
Exactly.
don't know. So look for the solid cash flow deals that, as you know, you said that you've been listening to the Real Wealth Show for a while. And thank you for that. Yeah. How did you find us?
Actually, it was my mom. She, you and I, if folks don't know, you and I are both from the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And my mom used to listen to you and Jim Jorgensen on the radio. And for anybody who's, been paying attention, but she would talk about this Kathy lady. She really seems to know what she's doing. I'm like, yep. So I've been a fan. So it's actually my mom who introduced me a long time ago.
Oh, maybe she was listening to KSFO. That's really
she was absolutely a little AM radio in the kitchen. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that talk radio. Oh boy.
Yeah, I remember it indeed. So I've been a fan for a long time.
Oh, so glad to have you here sharing your wisdom.
I wish my mom passed away, so she would have been thrilled though to hear me say, "Hey, guess who I spoke with today?" So.
Oh.
Yeah.
She's listening.
No, she's thrilled, I'm sure.
Oh. That's beautiful. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up, but one last tip with everything you just said of, the opportunities, but also the threats and how to move forward and steer your boat through it, knowing storms could be coming, but you still got to get where you want to be. What's some just tips or advice you would give somebody who might be a little nervous right now?
Sure, absolutely. I'll circle back to the two strengths that I think are sort of part of my core genius. And I would encourage anybody to figure out what their core genius is too, because that's what you bring to the party. Figure that out and own it. So my core genius is one, I have a scorched earth educational outlook. Which is to say, I might hear somebody on a podcast that I've never heard before. I'll write that person's name down and I'll go back online. I will find every single interview that person did. I'll hear a lot of the same stories, but every interview with a different podcast gives me a more nuanced picture of this person's story. So that's what I mean about scorched earth. Once you find something you're interested in or a topic you're interested in, run it down and really know it. And not just about the tactics that you're interested in, but about the much broader picture as well, because it's I mine my own exposure for nuggets from other industries that I apply to real estate investing. So I encourage people read and study broadly and also deeply. And then the second thing I would encourage folks to do is one of my strengths is relationships, making connections with folks, and I often tell people, it's your education will allow you to see both challenges and dangers ahead, but it's your relationships that will help you capitalize on them and make money and keep yourself protected. And that's really the two tips I would say, folks. Read more and start shaking more hands and connecting with folks.
Or tapping more elbows or more Zoom calls.
Yeah. Or Zoom calls, exactly.
Yeah.
All business is about relationship. Absolutely.
Great stuff. Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Indeed. I'm delighted. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show. You can listen to this and any past episodes at realwealthshow.com.